Hi, good morning.
All right, so you know this man personally. Talk to us about him, and you say specifically he's been a champion for women.
Oh, absolutely. I've heard the talking points that we were just hearing, and there's absolutely no truth to them. As we all heard in his opening remarks at the White House, his mother was a trailblazer in the law. She was a prosecutor and a judge back when it was really tough, particularly tough for women to be in this profession, and her struggles really shaped him, and we see that in practice. So, for example, he has hired over the last 12 years more women than men. Over half of his clerks have been women. 1 year, he hired only women. And I can tell you from personal experience, as you said, I've known him for 12 years. He was my first boss out of law school 11 years ago, and since then has remained the strongest advocate for my career. And then if you want to look at his judicial opinions, you also see the same type of awareness of the challenges that women face. In one case, for example, there was a woman who had been badly beaten by her boyfriend and then went on to commit crimes with her boyfriend. And what the judge said was this woman could have felt compelled to commit those crimes because of the abuse that she had suffered. In other words, even though she wasn't under duress, there was no gun to her head, literally, she could have felt that way because of the battered woman syndrome. So he's really a pathbreaker in the law, and we see it. We see it across.
Yeah, some very important nuance and context there. Yet, as he faces his confirmation, not a single Democrat senator has yet to meet with Brett Kavanaugh. What are they missing when he sits there and lays out his judicial philosophy to them? What are they missing?
I think they're missing, well, 12 years, 300 opinions that have touched on really every single issue that is important to the American people. So when you have Democrats coming out from the get-go saying we are not going to vote for him, when they haven't had a chance to read all of that, it's really striking. And then you couple that with what you said, some kind of request for an unprecedented number of documents. It's just a striking contrast there. And so what they're missing is a long history, a very long record of enforcing laws that protect the American people and the American economy. Just two quick examples. In one case where a large restaurant chain was trying to displace a bunch of American workers and bring in foreign, cheaper labor, he said that that was unlawful. Mere economic expediency for a company is not enough to fire a bunch of American workers. In a second quick example, when a foreign company tried to get rid of their Made in China labels, he again said that was unfair to American consumers. If they want to know what products are made in America versus made in China, they have a right to buy American if they want.
Zena, I love your perspective, knowing him so personally, but also bringing up his mom, because he spoke about her when he spoke to the country, and what an example she's been to him all his life. It's an important perspective to have. Zena, thanks for being with us this morning. We will see how all of this plays out.
Democratic socialism is on the rise in the U.S. Case in point, New York congressional candidate Ocasio-Cortez, who claims the capitalism is on the way out. Listen.
Right now, when we have this no-holds-barred, Wild West hyper-capitalism, what that means is profit at any cost. Capitalism has not always existed in the world, and it will not always exist in the world.
The future of the Democratic Party right there, the Wild West of hyper-capitalism. But while the progressive left continues to attack our capitalist society and economy, our next guest has a dire warning about the perils of living in a socialist country. Let's bring in Republican strategist and attorney Peter Lamage, who fled communist Albania to America 30 years ago. Peter, thank you very much for being here. Look at these numbers right here to begin with. The Democratic Socialists of America, their membership, it was at 5,000 in 2016. It's at 45,000 in 2018. And the standard bearer of really the enthusiasm of the last election was Bernie Sanders, who labeled himself a Democratic Socialist. Let people know what is so dangerous about dabbling in this.
Look, when you talk about democratic socialism, it's a misnomer. It doesn't exist. You cannot establish socialism without force. You need force to do that. That is a transition between capitalism and complete communism. And without the force, you cannot establish some sort of democratic socialism that they are calling that. It is all about command and control. The government wants to have complete command and control over the population and the means of production, and that is what they are fighting for.
Absolutely. So another stat we've got here is political views amongst U.S. millennials. Nearly 6 in 10 affiliate with the Democratic Party or lean in that direction. We've always known young people tend to be left-leaning. The ideas sound great on paper or in concept, but ultimately America was founded on free people and free markets. You fled Albania, communism. What happens when command and control happens and the free market subsides?
Pretty much the government is controlling your life or my life. I think that people should be warned when Arnold Toynbee told us years ago that great civilizations are not murdered, they commit suicide. We are at the verge of committing suicide. What socialists want right here in the United States, the biggest fear that they have is the Constitution itself. Because the Constitution, when the Founding Fathers established it, they wanted you and I to be free, to have the liberty and prosperity and to pursue the dreams that God gave us, the rights that God gave us.
Not what government gave us.
Not the government. The government, if they grant us rights, they can remove those rights any time that they want. And that is the slippery slope that we're taking here in the United States. Right here in the state of Connecticut, for example, you have a socialist whose father was a member of the Communist Party running for governor. And the hypocrisy over here is that he used capitalism to make billions of dollars. He lives in British Connecticut.
So
on the other hand, he wants your money and my money to forcefully be redistributed.
Well, because he thinks he knows better than you. You're dumb. He's smart. He's going to tell you what to do. Ultimately, where does this inevitably go? How do we do Democrats truly believe in socialism, or are they trying to win elections by saying we'll give you more free stuff?
No, they believe in socialism. They want
so
to
when they say they want to
socialism.
fundamentally transform, because Bernie Sanders says, I want to transform America. Is he rejecting the Constitution and capitalism and saying, I want a different country?
Absolutely they are. That is the biggest fear that they have, because Constitution itself limits the government. These people want to have unlimited powers. They want to make sure that you and I have our rights limited, not the government powers.
So are they finally being honest? Are Democrats just sort of, now they're out, and they're just like, well, we always kind of wanted collectivism. We always wanted government control. Now we're just going to say it.
These socialist candidates, they are being very honest. I mean, look what happened in the Bronx. You have a lady who attended Boston University, lived in Westchester County, completely hypocrite, moves to the Bronx, New York, takes advantage and manipulates the people of the Bronx over there to give her the nomination for Congress by promising them free stuff. The question is, where is the free stuff coming from?
And she doesn't even really know what she's talking about, as her interviews revealed. It seems that the dogma she learned in college lives loudly within her, and she's willing to continue.
And that's where we're failing as a society. We're not educating our kids properly. We're not teaching them about the American exceptionalism, about constitutionalism, about the dangers of socialism, and we're failing our kids by not doing that.
That's the challenge. The hidden hand of the free market is more difficult to explain than free stuff from people that promise you things that have always ended in disaster. That's why you came here 30 years ago. Peter, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Amazing and great perspective. Immigrants oftentimes give the best perspective on how special it is.
And there are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of them out there who will give you the same story.
Love it. Thank you, Peter. Appreciate it. Welcome back. Well, the DOJ releasing more than 400 pages of Fisa documents. Although heavily redacted, they do reveal that the anti-Trump dossier was not just a major factor, it was source number one in the warrants for surveillance of former Trump campaign advisor Carter Page.
Here to react, Fox News contributor and former federal prosecutor Andrew McCarthy. We are really looking forward to hearing your perspective. You have now devoured the documents. What is your takeaway?
I'm really embarrassed because I told people for months that this could never, ever happen. What I told people was that you're not even going to hear about the dossier when we finally learn what's in the FISA warrants, that what the FBI will do is what the FBI always does, which is they'll take 7 or 8 facts that are important, they'll scrub them so that the FBI can verify and corroborate them, and those will be put into the affidavit, and that'll be the only thing you hear about. When you read this thing, it's astonishing. They actually, it's as if they took the dossier and slapped
whole
a
cloth
district court caption on it and gave it to the judge, which is exactly what I told people would never happen.
There's a nugget. We were just in the break. You found a nugget, which I did not, but that's because only you can find this. What have you found?
Well, actually, I must say, I mean, this is so bad that they ought to be looking at the judges who signed off on this stuff, not just the people who gave it. And it doesn't take, if you've done this stuff, it doesn't take, this is so bad, it screams out at you. But this says, this is just 3 lines, 3.5 lines.
Page 58. You
right, 53.
53? Sorry.
Right. The FBI has reviewed this verified application for accuracy in accordance with its procedures. They haven't verified it, and it's not accurate. So, you know, the 2 most important things, 3.5 lines, they can't even get that right.
Now, that says that, so that our viewers, some of them maybe just waking up, is suggesting that they verified as accurate and factual the dossier, which we know has so many holes, and that is the source number 1.
Right. What they're saying is the assertions we're making to the court, we verified. Now, just to explain how this works. Let's say, forget about Fisa and intelligence. Let's say it's a drug case, and I want a warrant because I think they're selling or they're making heroin packages in a house, right? So I bring my agent to the judge, and I say, we need a search warrant. And the judge says, fine, what's your probable cause? And I say, Judge, I have this great agent here. Every year he wins Agent of the Year. He is like the best agent. He's got the most awards. The judge will look at me and say, but what's the probable cause? What did the people see, and who are the people who saw it, and why should I believe
What if he brought media reports? Would they count?
Well, I would have to bring media reports if I didn't have anything else, right? Because what they did here was they have this guy Steele who helped them in another case. And they don't have any idea who his sources are. His sources are unidentified. They're Russians. And they themselves are operating on hearsay information. So for the most part, even his sources are not claiming that they saw and heard the things that they're asking the judge to rely on. But the government isn't even bringing the sources to them. They're bringing Steele.
And they're verifying this is accurate. Let me just point out that on the next page, on page 54, we have the signature for verification. I doubt you can see that. We'll try and get it for you. It's page 54, and it says, I declare under penalty of perjury that the foregoing information regarding Carter Page is true and correct, the verification, and it is Supervisory Special Agent FBI. But that is, as you can see, redacted. Do you believe this morning, Andrew, that this agent should be at least behind closed doors interviewed as to why he would verify something that is now known to not be fully and wholly accurate?
You know, I'm betting number one, he probably has been interviewed already. I don't know why they redact the name of the agent, since the names of the judges are unredacted.
Right.
Why the agent should not be redacted or should be redacted, I don't know. And what I'm sure they would tell you is what I meant when I said it was true and accurate is that this really is what Steele told us. But that isn't what you need to. What you need to know is why should the judge believe what Steele represented his sources?
And Andy, you said multiple times it was renewed because of media reports.
Well, if you look at it, Pete, you know, they keep going back every 3 months. The warrant looks exactly the same. Now, you pointed out, Griff, that there's all kinds of redacted stuff, so we don't know what more they added. But it looks to me like they just kept bringing back the same stuff, including the Michael Isikoff article.
Yeah.
We've got to leave it there. We're out of time.
I think they'd have new info.
Fascinating.
Andy McCarthy, thank you for getting up early.
All right, more Fox and Friends right after this.
Great stuff. Okay, that was last night on Waters World. Jesse Waters and Anthony Scaramucci took on the national beer pong champs. Now, we showed you all of their highlights, literally. I think the beer pong champs eventually went on to smoke them. I'm going to bring in Anthony Scaramucci, former White House Communications Director, and David Bossie, Fox News contributor and former Deputy Campaign Manager. Okay, Anthony, come on. We showed the best we could, but you guys kind of got smoked last night.
We absolutely got eviscerated and destroyed, but we did it gallantly. That's all I have to say.
You did, with a lot of trying to distract them.
You know what, though? You talked a big game. You really played the role well. You had a lot of confidence. That's all that matters, you know?
Yeah.
Listen, you guys played beer pong in New York.
Hey, listen, the only thing I have is like psychological warfare, guys. That's all I have.
Well, listen, Dave Bossie and I play Fisa documents in D.C., and that is what we got to take that hard turn to the fact that we now have these 4 400 pages. Gentlemen, we just had Andrew McCarthy, U.S. Attorney, on, and a Fox News contributor, who walked us through a little bit of it. And one of the fascinating parts of it, just to sort of summarize, particularly for viewers who may be just waking up, we've learned that the Steele dossier was a major component of the warrant for what has now become the Mueller investigation.
It was source number one.
Andrew McCarthy says that the FBI, on page 53, says that it was verified, and we know that obviously isn't true. Gentlemen, I'll start with you, Dave. What do you make of this release and what we're learning?
Well, let's cover a couple of things. One is this looks like about 80 or 90% redacted, but what we are finding out is exactly what you just said, which was the Steele dossier was the basis for this entire case, this entire investigation, which calls it, look, Hillary Clinton paid for the Steele dossier. We now understand through this release that was a major component to getting the Fisa warrant to collect data on, to collect information on our campaign. It's outrageous. What I will also say is that we now understand why the Department of Justice is fighting Congress for releasing the documents to Congress. They must turn over the rest of these documents this week, or the president should declassify them. This is outrageous, and I think we're getting to the bottom of it.
Anthony, how are Trump supporters going to read this? Folks that are waking up this morning saying, okay, dossier used, A number one as evidence. What does it tell me about the nexus of this investigation?
Well, I think it definitely has hardened them in their support. There's a reason why 90% of the Republican Party is behind the president. But in addition to what David is saying, just think about when we always talk about the cover-up being worse than the crime. The Justice Department would be so much better served right now if they just admit that this thing is a catastrophe, pull back, and go into full retreat. And so they're not going to do that, of course, because of the stubbornness. But yet they've constantly attacked us on the campaign about different things like this. So the hypocrisy abounds inside of Washington. And this is very, very good for the president going into the midterms. I predict as this stuff starts to come out, his popularity will rise, and so will the people that he's supporting in the midterms.
Dave, let me just quickly ask you, because you're saying, the president should declassify the rest of it if it's not forthcoming. But with regards to Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, what we've learned is that source number one, Christopher Steele, was discredited as a source. Do you believe that this raises questions for Rod Rosenstein, and do they rise to the level of recusal?
It's very troubling. It's very troubling to see him signing on to this FISA warrant. I'll be honest with you. I think that what Jeff Sessions did, there's no comparison here. He met a Russian ambassador at a reception and he recused himself. Rod Rosenstein must recuse himself, and it calls into question his judgment as somebody who is fighting Congress for the release of these documents. Now we understand through this redaction, or through this release of documents, that he actually signed the document to allow the FISA warrant. I don't understand how he could oversee this, and now I understand, and it calls into question the judgment at the top levels of the Department of Justice and FBI. We see why, all these agents, Strzok and Page and others, were hating this president and doing whatever it could, using the Steele dossier as the underlying evidence to get these fake FISA warrants. And it's just devastating to this country what they have done.
Yeah, we're not talking about low-level employees. I mean, it's fascinating, incredible that it continues to go back to the highest levels within the DOJ at the FBI. You mentioned Hillary Clinton earlier, David, and Anthony, I want to get your take on this. She was out and about last night here in New York City at Aussie Fest, and she took the time to talk about politics, as she often does, and attack the president, President Trump, for his handling of the Russia summit last week. Here's what she said about that.
Is why the president has not spoken up for our country. Yes. And we saw that most clearly in this recent meeting with Putin. We don't know what was said in the room, or just the two of them.
My reaction to that is, I think we all remember that moment where she physically held up that reset button. You remember with Foreign Minister Lavrov of Russia, to reset the relationship between the United States and Russia back when she was Secretary of State. Much of where we are today is because our inability to get it right with Russia all the years leading up to where we are now. So isn't she in part to blame for where we are?
Well, she's certainly in part to blame, but I think the bigger the bigger thing here is that she's running for president, and so it's just obvious to me that she's going to do everything she can to get herself inserted into the 2020 race. And I'll tell you what, she'll probably run for president in 2060 off of a Ouija board. She does not want to leave the earth or be in the beyond not being the president of the United States. So it's just very, very interesting that she's not going to give up in any way, shape, or form. Now, I personally sort of admire that, even though I don't like her policies, that she's that relentless. But if you're saying that she's hypocritical about the Russian situation and our ability to get along with the Russians, of course she is, Abby, and that's the biggest problem in politics. And that's why the American people are so frustrated, and so many of them are supporting the president's mission to try to reduce tensions with Russia.
David, you were the deputy campaign manager on the campaign that beat Hillary Clinton. Please give us your commentary on that, but also the front page of this morning's failing New York Times talk about how the Democrats are bracing for moving even further to the left. What is that preview for what the Democrat Party would be and who their nominee might be?
Yeah, Hillary Clinton is really doing a lot of damage to herself and to this country. Al Gore, when he lost, could have easily, for the next year or two, put himself in a position against President Bush and tried to attack his policies and said he won the election when he didn't. And this is what Hillary Clinton is doing. She's doing great damage to our democracy, and we have to take it seriously. She is so angry and hate-filled that she lost this election fair and square to our great president, that she cannot get over it. It's been nearly 19 months or 20 months since the election. She clearly is not over it. And look, the Obama administration did everything politically it could to try and stop this president. That's why there needs to be more hearings about that. But to go to the midterms, the Democrats continue to go to the left. They continue to nominate the wildest-eyed, crazy liberal leftist in race after race across the country. And I welcome that with open arms, because it's going to show this November, when you have Republicans who are saying we're going to be for law and order, we're going to support the men and women of ICE and Border Patrol, we're going to be cutting your taxes, we're going to be trying to build a wall, we're going to be for security at home and abroad, against the left. It is going to be a clear picture, and I think the American people are going to reward us for it.
And I just want to end where we began, and that is a little D.C.-New York rivalry. Pete and Anthony versus Griff and Dave, beer pong, date TBD.
Anytime. I'll take the mooch on my team anytime. It's a great shot.
I'll be practicing for the next 6 months.
Keep practicing, Dave. Keep practicing.
Good to see you both. Have a great day.
I'll keep coming back.
Thanks so much.
Yeah. Welcome back. Well, you may have heard a lot of President Trump's critics complain about the dark times that we are living in, but a new op-ed gives them a much-needed reality check.
Bethany Mandel writes, a person born in 1911 experienced between their 18th and 20th birthday, Great Depression, 40th birthday, excuse me, the Great Depression, Pearl Harbor, World War II, the Cold War, and the risk of nuclear war, the Korean War, and the rise of communist China. Perhaps we should keep that in mind the next time we refer to 2018 as dark times.
Bethany Mandel joins us now with more on this. She's an editor at Ricochet and a New York Post contributor. Bethany, great piece.
Thanks.
Fascinating. My favorite part is where you talk about millennials and you say one of the favorite adages of woke millennials is check your privilege.
Yeah.
Certainly applies here.
Yeah. I mean, it's so crazy to me that we talk about how hard it is to live in America. And I've lived in the third world. And let me tell you, we've got it pretty easy here, and we've always had it easy. And this is just sort of a representation of the fact that so many of my generation always had a president that they liked. And so along comes a president that they don't like, and all of a sudden it's end times. And it's really not affecting their day-to-day lives in any meaningful way at all.
It's gotten so bad that you can't even talk about anything good going on in this country.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the economy. You say, you know what, things are going well, but in your piece you say that, Democrats, for example, can't even point to anything positive because they might be giving the president credit for something, and we just can't have that.
Yeah, I mean, what's crazy to me is more like your personal life, and when people's personal lives are going well. I gave an example of James Van Der Beek had a baby, and on his Instagram post, it was like paragraph after paragraph after paragraph about child separation at the border, which is a horribly tragic, painful thing. But then at the end, that last line, oh, by the way, her name is Gwendolyn. It's like, this is actually just a birth announcement, and it's not a political diatribe. And imagine what Gwendolyn's going to think when she sees her birth announcement in 15 or 20 years. Yeah. What, you guys were more focused on President Trump than you were on me on my birthday? I know that I'm the 5th, but come on, guys.
Yeah. Gwendolyn is a great name. I'm biased myself. But what does it tell you about not understanding history? When you think in this little fishbowl you live in right now, it's got to be the darkest, worst times. And it's what a great reminder you give of that analogy. We've been through some tough times.
Yeah, we've had presidents assassinated. We've lived through the world wars. And at the end of the day, I mean, you don't have to like the president. I don't like the president every day. But I can still be happy in my day-to-day life, and I can still appreciate, like you said, the economy is doing really well. We have.
So how do we as people, as friends, as family, help each other out? Because it's gotten so bad where, you know, even in my own family, you can't talk about politics anymore because it is so divisive, and even just the name Trump coming up, I mean, all hell can break loose.
I know.
So what advice do you have for people today of how we can actually get along better? How can we talk about our daily lives in a way that it just doesn't stop at the word of Trump?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly don't know, because it's gotten to the point where you can't even say that you have had happiness in your personal life without adding a caveat. There's an asterisk.
Exactly. You say you're not a Trump supporter per se. You're just like, can't I just be happy?
Yeah, and I'm not apologetic about it. And there was one hysterical tweet that said, you know, I was dry heaving and I was in the fetal position in the shower, and I'm like, I buried both of my parents before my 20th birthday, and I don't even think I did that. Like, you got to have a little bit of perspective. Like, so Hillary Clinton wasn't elected. Like, I wasn't the happiest person in the world on election night either, but, like, woke up the next morning, got my kids dressed. And
Bethany, great piece. I'm actually putting my daughter's going on a broad trip today.
Nice.
She's 16, and get a little bit of perspective, because as you point out, you go other places, you realize how good we got it here. Thanks for being here.
Thanks.
Thank you, Bethany.
And you also had your baby in a car, delivered in the car. So
yes, I should have been on the last segment.
Crazy delivery story.
Welcome to that family.
Yes, indeed. Thanks for being here.
President Trump touting a booming economy as his latest executive order aims to train millions for jobs in the American workforce.
And that is not all. A reversal of Obama-era oil regulations now reportedly putting Texas on target to top Iraq and Iran as the world's largest producer. Former Shell Oil Company President John Hofmeister joins us right now to react, and a great voice and perspective on this. John, great to have you with us.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
I mean, the more independent the U.S. can become with oil, the better we will be, right? The better the world will be.
Absolutely. We've been victims of OPEC oil price fluctuation for decades and decades, while at the same time we have not developed our U.S. natural resources to take care of our own opportunities for growth and value creation. I'm on a program, and have been since I retired from Shell, to try to promote American resources for Americans, because we have it, so why don't we use it, create the jobs here, and don't be victims of the fluctuations that come from OPEC.
John, why, I guess the question, we have become so competitive?
Well, the main reason is we've changed the technology by which we produce oil and gas. It used to be that every well was a unique custom well, just like we used to make cars one at a time. When today we make cars with automated assembly lines with a whole bunch of technology involved, that's what's happened in the oil field. And so we've become so much more productive, especially in shale formations, where we know where the oil is precisely, and so we can develop so much more so quickly. And an oil field, instead of a collection of custom wells, becomes like a factory putting out oil and gas because of the nature of how we produce oil today.
What does it do to impact our standing in the world? Because obviously Russia has a huge leverage in the market, and Europe relies on them in large part because of oil. So the more independent we become, does that give us a much greater strength in foreign policy, for example?
Well, first of all, it would disconnect us from OPEC pricing, so that the cost of energy to Americans would be based upon American production rather than withholding oil like OPEC has done so many times to keep the price up. And as we know, high oil prices makes other consumers have a more difficult time buying everything they need. So if we can keep steady state oil prices, and if we can shift to natural gas fuels, we could say goodbye to OPEC forever And that would lead to lower prices, sustained value creation, and more American jobs as far into the future as we could see.
Yeah.
That sounds like a good thing. And, John, as you were saying when we were talking to you at the break, you say, let the rest of the guys fight it out amongst themselves. We'll just become independent.
That's right.
Yeah. Awesome stuff. John, great to have you on this morning.
Thank you.
Good to see you. Have a great Sunday.
Rod Rosenstein must recuse himself, and it calls into question his judgment as somebody who is fighting Congress for the release of these documents. Now we understand through this redaction, or through this release of documents, that he actually signed the document to allow the Fisa warrant. I don't understand how he could oversee this, and now I understand, and it calls into question the judgment at the top levels of the Department of Justice and FBI.
That was David Bossie earlier on our program. Joining us now, Maria Bartiromo, host of Sunday Morning Futures, which you're not going to want to miss in just about 27 minutes.
Thank you so much.
What do you make of the calls for Rosenstein to recuse himself, but more generally, this FISA revelation?
This entire FISA documents that we have right here with Griff is basically evidence that what we all have been warned about and the suggestions out there are true. I think it's high time that we all admit the Obama administration spied on the Trump campaign for political reasons. They were spying on the campaign because it was their political enemy. I mean, stop dancing around it. Let's just admit what the case is. And obviously, the Dems and the left and the detractors of President Trump are going to have to admit this at some point. Look at all of these redactions.
Carter Page was just the gateway, and yet they haven't found anything on Carter
Well, this
Page.
is the most extraordinary thing. Carter Page was the guy who was wiretapped. You know, we have a comment from him this morning, and no charges at all. I mean, the fact that he's still running around, if he was this, Russian agent, then why haven't there been any charges? This charade has got to stop.
Well, Mark Meadows has been tweeting out about this, head of the Freedom Caucus. You have Bob Goodlatte on your show.
That's right.
Next hour. What do you think the big questions are going to be coming from them? Because they may have the chance now to sit down with Rosenstein and others that have been part of this and try and get to the bottom of it.
Well, I understand that the witness list is growing in terms of Bob Goodlatte's list. He's going to join me, the chairman of the Judiciary Committee. We're going to get his reaction to this FISA warrant evidence and also get a list from him of who exactly he would like to speak to. I understand John Brennan is on that list. I mean, here you have John Brennan trashing the president at every moment that he can. Meanwhile, he's incredibly conflicted in this story. Rod Rosenstein, you make a great point. The bottom line on Rod Rosenstein is increasingly, for the last several months, all of the chairmen of these committees, Oversight, Nunes on Intel, Gowdy, Ratcliffe, Goodlatte, they're all saying that Rod Rosenstein is conflicted because he signed off on that last warrant for the FISA.
He's on the hook. I got to ask you about one other thing, though, because obviously I love this FISA thing. I'm going to talk about it all week. I'm sure we're putting I'm going to steal Pete's copy of the, as he calls it, the failing New York Times. There has been a story yesterday on AP Today in the New York Times. You see Democrats brace as storm brews farther to the left. We've seen this young woman running here in the Bronx, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. You're going to talk a little bit about that today. What do you make of the rise of socialism?
And let me tell you, that is the future of the Democratic Party. If you listen to the head of the DNC, Tom Perez just said a month ago that Alexandria is the future of the Democratic Party. What I have found, speaking to moderate Democrats out there, friends, colleagues, they are so alienated by this party. They think they've gone completely bananas. Abolish ICE, no borders, open borders. Who wants that?
And it's not just that. I mean, from an economic standpoint, you've got free Medicare for all, $15 minimum wage, and free college tuition.
Don't forget, Nancy Pelosi's going to raise your taxes. There's that.
Universal basic income will just give you money. You're a capitalist. What does it say to you when the other major party in our country says, no, we're for socialism?
I think of Trump derangement syndrome again. They hate him so much that they are willing to throw away all of our ideals and values around capitalism and democracy.
It's interesting, you listen to Joe Biden, who was on the border. He was in Arizona on Friday, and he's thinking about running in 2020 against President Trump. And just the way that he's talking about immigration and the border and his rhetoric, it's very clear that he knows in order to win that primary, you got to go there. You got to say those things.
Bingo. It's exactly right. You have to go there because that's where the leadership wants to go. That's why, in my view, any moderate Democrat that wants to go up against President Trump in 2020, you don't even get your party's nomination. Tim Ryan, and the list goes on. They're not going to get the nomination because the leadership of the left has been hijacked by Barack Obama, Elizabeth Warren, and Bernie Sanders. There you go.
Well said.
You got a big show coming
up. We got a big show. We got Bob Goodlatte, Chairman of Judiciary. Alan Dershowitz is coming on. Then we're going to talk to Steve Scalise about that, the Majority Whip. He's going to talk to us about the Democratic Party and the expectations going into the midterm elections. Big interview. We're also talking with Bill Browder. Live interview with Bill Browder, who, of course, we know has been targeted by Vladimir Putin. So he'll be my guest as well.
That will be a great
Thank you so much.
Maria, we'll see you soon.
Okay.
That was Wednesday. They're still doing it. Democrats and liberals, leftists protesting outside the White House, making their message clear. Whatever that is, our next guest says protesting and resistance have become the Democrat Party's culture. Radio talk show host Chris Plant joins us now to explain. Chris, thanks for being here this morning. They were there last night. The president's not even there, but they're outside the White House for the 6th straight day protest. What are they protesting, and what does it say about the left today?
You know, it's the culture of protest. It's the culture of resistance that Barack Obama has inflicted upon our country. He was a community organizer. He's left thousands of community organizers in his wake, and they need to protest something. Now, these guys, look, they're out there in the middle of the night in a dark park across from an empty house, screaming at the top of their lungs to protest something that they can't really define, but they get people to turn out anyway. I mean, you know and I know that if you called on a group of Republicans to show up outside of an empty house in the middle of the night, in the dark, in a dark and empty park, to protest people that aren't there, that no one would show up. But we know that these people show up for a week running now. You know, every day is an IQ test, as I like to say, and I've got to say these people aren't really faring very well right now. But this is part of the legacy of President Obama. And it's just making noise, assaulting people in restaurants, insulting people at gas stations, drumming up mobs to shout people down. This is today's Democrat Party. And look, it's the left. You know, we've seen this culture of protest in Europe for decades now, but we didn't really have it here before Barack Obama. Now we do.
Yeah, I've actually tried it. I've been outside the White House with a megaphone with vets trying to get the VA fixed, and we couldn't get many people to join us, let alone sustain it for 6 days. Well, they've got guests coming. Alyssa Milano's been there, Michael Avenatti, Stormy Daniels' attorney, a couple of members of Congress. So it's not just the grassroots. This is resistance coming from leaders as well.
Yeah, oh, it absolutely is. And as you said, there's a big Hollywood actress, Alyssa Milano. You got Stormy Daniels, the porn star's lawyer, who's a big TV celebrity now. You've got, and listen, to me, it's the perfect Venn diagram of the Democratic Party. You've got Hollywood, pornography, and a left-wing congressman named Castro. What more do you need to know about today's Democrat Party? Screaming in the dark outside an empty house in an effort to keep the first family awake at night, because if they don't like Donald Trump, I think they'd only like him better after several nights of sleep deprivation.
Whatever those concentric circles may be, they all do center around hatred for this president. Is this a winning strategy for the left? They're counting on it in 18. You know they're going to count on it in 20. Where does this get them?
I don't think it wins many friends. Look, I mean, if they knew anything about history, in 1968, Richard Nixon won in a landslide because the left was in the street violently beating people up and setting things on fire. They're back. They haven't learned the lessons of history. This is the left. I mean, look, this is not the Democrat Party. I grew up in a Democrat household. I used to be a Democrat. This is the left. They're not Democrats. They're the left.
Well, Ronald Reagan famously said he didn't leave the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party left him. I think we're seeing a lot of that as the party moves extreme to the left. Thank you very much, Chris. Appreciate your time.
And from the news right now, the Justice Department making its first public disclosure of a highly sensitive FISA request by releasing the heavily redacted version of the documents relating to that FISA warrant against former Trump campaign foreign policy advisor Carter Page. The 400-plus pages were released as a result of lawsuits filed by several media organizations, including Judicial Watch. The documents reveal major components in the FBI surveillance requests leading up to the 2016 presidential election. They were memos written by Christopher Steele. That is what they used to get the warrant. The former British intelligence officer hired by a research firm working for Trump's opponent, Hillary Clinton. The president reacting on Twitter early this morning, saying this: "Congratulations to @Judicial Watch and @Tom Fitton on being successful in getting the Carter Page FISA documents. As usual, they are ridiculously heavily redacted, but confirm with little doubt that the Department of Justice and the FBI misled the courts, witch hunt, rigged a scam. The president later tweeted this, looking more and more like the Trump campaign for president was illegally being spied upon, surveillance for the political gain of crooked Hillary Clinton and the DNC. Ask her how that worked out. She did better with crazy Bernie. Republicans must get tough now, an illegal scam. Joining me right now with his first reaction to all of this is House Judiciary Committee Chairman and Virginia Republican Congressman Bob Goodlatte. Mr. Chairman, it's good to see you this morning. Thanks so much for joining us.
Good morning, Maria. It's good to be with you.
Well, what strikes me about all of these documents that I've been looking at all morning is all of the redactions on every page. Major black lines redacted. So tell us, what did we learn from this FISA warrant?
Well, we certainly learned that there is a serious problem with the FBI presenting to the FISA court an application for a search warrant against a United States citizen and then followed by 3 renewals when they were basing it on a very flawed document, the so-called Steele dossier that has never been verified. Even after all of this came out, they attempted to verify it and failed. So that's number one. Number two, I have had the opportunity, as have a few other members of the House of Representatives, the opportunity to read these FISA warrant applications without all of those redactions. There are only a few redactions in the document that I reviewed, and I think it is critically important that the American people have the opportunity to see most of the rest of those documents. We want to make sure that we're protecting sources. We want to make sure that we're protecting methods that are used in investigations, but most of the information that is redacted in that report should easily be seen by the American people. They can judge for themselves, but I will tell you it does not support the issuance of a warrant against Mr. Page.
So what will be done about it?
Well, certainly this is a big development for the investigation that I, as chairman of the Judiciary Committee, Trey Gowdy, as chairman of the Oversight and Government Reform Committee, have been pursuing now for the last 9 months because, as you know, at each step in that process, the FBI has objected to our looking into this matter because they claim it's part of an ongoing investigation. And we have said all along we're not interested in looking at the substance of anything that Mr. Mueller does find in his investigation. We don't want to interfere with that, but we do want to see how this investigation was launched and how it contrasts with the shocking way that they handled the Hillary Clinton email investigation. So that is an absolutely critical aspect of this, and now we have a federal judge who agrees that information regarding that investigation can and should be made public and has ordered it to be made public. Much more needs to be done in that regard, but the Congress, which has subpoena power and has issued subpoenas with regard to both documents and witnesses, is entitled to have answers to our questions, and I think that this is a major boost to that effort.
There's one redaction here about an agent. Agent launching this investigation? Are we assuming that that is Peter Strzok, who's also his name redacted in this warrant?
I can't comment on the redacted items in that until a court has ordered them to be made public, but I can say that based upon our other aspects of this investigation, that Peter Strzok was at the heart of both the Hillary Clinton email investigation, where the FBI bent over backwards to find every way possible to not proceed with that case, and in fact, as you know, they did decide in a very public and controversial way not to proceed in that investigation. And he was also at the heart of the beginning of this investigation into so-called Trump campaign Russia collusion.
I want to know what this tells us about the Robert Mueller probe, because you go back to Carter Page, and here's the guy who was actually wiretapped and surveilled. If Carter Page was an agent of a foreign power working for the Russians, why is he still running around free? Why are there no charges against Carter Page? And by the way, what does that say about Comey, McCabe, Yates, Rosenstein, and the others who repeatedly certified to the court that he was an agent of foreign power? Why has he not been charged then?
Well, excellent question. He was surveilled for a solid year. 3-month increments with 3 renewals, and I don't believe they found anything with regard to him. I cannot speak for him, and I can't speak for Special Counsel Mueller. And as I've said before, he has been charged with a responsibility to carry out, and if he finds evidence of collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia, he should bring it forward. This investigation is now more than 2 years old, and it is, I think, he's only been on the job for a little over a year, but this was going on for almost a year before he came on the scene. And still it is a cloud, a shadow over this administration. It is something that if they have the goods, as Chairman Gowdy has said, bring them to a grand jury. If you don't, let's let the world know that they don't have that evidence.
I want to run for you what Senator Rand Paul said on Fox News this past week, because I'm wondering if this information and all that we're gleaning from all of this, whether it's the FISA warrant or your interactions with Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, which I'm going to get to, if that is going to dictate where the Robert Mueller investigation goes. You would think that it would, since his mandate is collusion with the Russians. Here's what Senator Rand Paul said about all of this week on Fox News. Listen to this, Mr. Chairman.
The president sees the Mueller investigation. He sees all these accusations from partisan Democrats, Hillary Clinton saying, oh, he colluded with the Russians. But then he also sees that the only people who actually we know colluded with the Russians were Hillary Clinton, who paid a British agent, who then paid Russians for information for this dossier. So he feels like the intelligence community cooked up a political or partisan investigation.
Would Robert Mueller interview Hillary Clinton?
Well, I can't speak for Robert Mueller, but I can very heartily agree with Senator Paul when he says that Democratic operatives related to the Clinton campaign and the Democratic National Committee paid for the creation of this so-called Steele dossier and then turned it over to the Federal Bureau of Investigation. But what's so unprecedented about this is that the FBI then took it, weaponized it without ever verifying its credibility, and brought it to the FISA court without disclosing the source of that information. That is deeply troubling, and it is a part of the reason why the new FBI director has been hard at work trying to reform this organization whose credibility has been damaged by a few key people. And by the way, those few key people are the same people in both of these investigations. James Comey, Andrew McCabe, Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, the FBI counsel, the chief of staff to the director, the same people in both these investigations, in one instance doing everything possible to avoid indicting Hillary Clinton, including allowing her chief aides to be in the room with her when she was interviewed by the FBI, creating a memo exonerating her before most of the witnesses, including Secretary Clinton, had been interviewed. Not putting this before a grand jury, even though they had impaneled a grand jury in that investigation. They didn't let the grand jury determine whether she should be indicted. And then changing the language in the memo from gross negligence to extreme carelessness. Gross negligence very closely tracks the statute. Extreme carelessness is not a meaningful phrase, all to avoid indicting her. Yeah. That is shocking.
And many of the people that you mentioned, they have signed, they're on the signage page of this FISA warrant, they all signed it, okaying it, and that includes John Brennan, Sally Yates, John Brennan, Jim Comey, Peter Strzok. So John Brennan, he is the man who deserves a belated bit of scrutiny, according to the Wall Street Journal, Kim Strassel's op-ed just this past week. We know that John Brennan has been all over town trashing President Trump and trashing the hearing that your committee actually did with Peter Strzok. What are your thoughts on John Brennan's involvement?
Well, we have lots of questions for John Brennan, and he will definitely be sought by the committee's for an interview. This is an extremely disturbing thing to see both he and James Comey, supposedly impartial government officials carrying out their jobs in very important areas in intelligence gathering and law enforcement, express the kind of extreme bias that they've shown now, which I think reflects quite accurately on what they were doing back in 2016.
So he's on your list of witnesses to have in to interview them?
Absolutely.
Who else is on
Definitely.
that list?
Well, we're going to go through. We've received a list from the Intelligence Committee of literally dozens of people. We're going through that list now and determining which ones are our priority. I think I would rather leave it at that, but certainly we will also be talking to Director Comey and former Attorney General Lynch.
Let me ask you about Lisa Page. I know that you had behind closed-door meetings with her, but apparently during that hearing you have discovered more information that you want. Can you tell us anything about the Lisa Page testimony and what you learned?
Well, it was a private, confidential interview, but I will say this, that Ms. Page, in contrast to Mr. Strzok, was far more forthcoming and gave us far more information regarding what was going on in 2016 and into 2017 to help our investigation. But I'll also say that she reminded us of some documents that hadn't been talked about for a while, including the fact that there are not only memos by James Comey that we're all aware of, but also memos by Andrew McCabe, the Deputy Director of the FBI, that are of interest to us as well, and we're seeking those now.
So now you're seeking those documents. I know that you have been focused, and certainly your colleague Devin Nunes has been focused on any information before the actual investigation was launched, which was July 31, 2016. Mr. Chairman, I want to take a short break, and then I want to come back to that. We also have much to discuss with you, including that showdown with Democrats over a House resolution to support ICE. We'll be right back with Chairman Goodlatte. Follow me on Twitter at Maria Bartiromo at Sunday Futures. Let us know what you'd like to hear from Chairman Goodlatte. And a quick programming note, former Democratic Vice Presidential nominee Senator Joe Lieberman will join me this Wednesday on Mornings with Maria on the Fox Business Network. So join me weekdays at 6 to 9 a.m. Eastern on Fox Business. We'll be right back with Chairman Goodlatte. We're back with House Judiciary Committee Chairman Bob Goodlatte. And Mr. Chairman, we know, based on the copies of the FISA warrant that we were able to look at today, that Rod Rosenstein, the Deputy AG, signed off on the FISA warrant, and they signed off 3 additional times, so a total of 4 times, with the same evidence. Are you among those calling for Rod Rosenstein to recuse himself?
I am not at this point. Rod Rosenstein did sign the 3rd renewal application, or in other words, the last FISA warrant application. He was asked at the hearing that he testified at a couple weeks ago whether or not he read the document. He declined to answer that because he claimed it was part of an ongoing investigation. I think that's an important question that he needs to answer, but I also think it's even more important that he continue to work with the Congress to move this forward so that we can get answers to all of our questions and get all of the documents that we have subpoenaed. There has been definitely more cooperation since we issued the subpoena and since U.S. Attorney John Lausch from the Northern District of Illinois was appointed to help us get those documents. We have much greater access to unredacted documents than we've had before, but we still have a long way to go. This is an ongoing investigation, and there are many more documents and many more questions that witnesses have been instructed by the FBI not to answer that need to be answered. And I think the fact that a judge has now ordered the release of this FISA warrant application shows that it is entirely appropriate for us to look into how this investigation was launched.
Yeah, and of course that investigation morphed into the Robert Mueller investigation, and there was one text from Peter Strzok to Lisa Page that basically says there's no there when the Robert Mueller investigation launched, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay, we'll keep following that. Let me move on to immigration. You've been working, obviously, with 2 bills. Are you going to be able to get one of them across the finish line before the midterm elections? What are your expectations, Mr. Chairman?
Well, you know, Maria, 224 House Republicans, all but 12 of the Republicans in the House, have voted for one of the two measures that we offered. Unfortunately, neither one got to 218. One got to 193, just 21 votes short of what is what was the majority that day.
Right.
And there are many members hard at work trying to make sure that we bring some of the measures from the second one into the first one and get it over 218 votes. That would be huge.
Okay, well, we'll wait for that. And real quick, I know you had some technology executives in a hearing as well. You are looking at the editing of information and conservative ideas. Tell us what you're looking at in terms of technology CEOs and where you are in that regard. Real quick, sir.
Well, we held a hearing last week with representatives from Facebook, Google, and Twitter, in the case of Google, particularly YouTube, regarding their censorship policies, which they do on all three of those social media platforms. And we have had the opportunity to ask some very probing questions about how it is that they have liability
Mr.
protections.
Chairman, we're going to be looking at this. Thank you so much. Welcome back to our top story today. The Justice Department released top-secret documents on the Fisa warrant sought for the Trump campaign aide Carter Page. The release of the heavily redacted 412-page report comes in response to several Freedom of Information lawsuits. It shows the FBI relied on the discredited Steele dossier as a major component to apply for a surveillance warrant on Carter Page. For his part, Page is maintaining his innocence. My next guest is the author of the new book, The Case Against Impeaching Trump. Harvard Law Professor Emeritus Alan Dershowitz joins me right now. And Alan, it's good to see you this morning. Your reaction to what we've received in terms of this FISA warrant, which is heavily redacted, every page, massive black spots. What do you think?
Well, I'm used to seeing redacted information. I would say 90% of redactions are generally designed to cover people's incompetence, and they're not national security. And I think you should have an objective, neutral person go through the redactions and always err in favor of publicly releasing and transparency rather than secrecy. But what it also shows us is that there is potentially a violation of a United States Supreme Court decision called Franks versus Maryland and its progeny. That case says when you make an application for a warrant, you have to be truthful. And if you omit important information or fail to disclose information that might discredit the source, there is a real legal problem. And here, of course, we know that the Steele dossier, we know how it was obtained, we know the circumstances, and the FISA court didn't know those pieces of information, should have known it. And the question really is, was there other information sufficient beyond the Steele dossier to justify intruding on the privacy rights of an American citizen?
That's
we
right.
don't know enough yet to answer that question.
Well, I mean, we know that one other piece of information used was a Yahoo article about the Steele dossier. So it was all based on the Steele dossier, and then they re-upped it. And they had to get additional sign-offs on it 3 times with the same information. Normally, you would, when you go to re-up a warrant, you have new information. It's all based on the dossier. Look, is it high time we all admit that the Obama administration spied on the Trump campaign because it was a political enemy and there was an election?
Well, I'd like to know more about that. That's why right from day one I called for an independent, nonpartisan, expert investigating commission that would look at the entire 2016 election, ranging from Comey's statements to Strzok to whether the Obama administration put a spy in the camp. All of these things are relevant to all Americans, and they're nonpartisan. We want to see fair elections. We don't want to see the thumb of any FBI agents, Justice Department officials, Russia, Comey. We don't want to see that thumb, even that pinky, on the scale of our own elections. And we're not learning this from the Mueller report.
I mean, it certainly doesn't feel good. It feels like it's rigged, this whole thing. What happens now, in your estimation, based on what we know from Peter Strzok, what we know about the hearings in terms of Lisa Page, and, of course, all of these texts?
Well, we'll see, first of all, whether any of this appears in Mueller's report. There's going to be a report. But there are also indictments, and there'll be some contested cases. And in the contested cases, lawyers have a gold mine to work with defense lawyers, challenging this FISA application, challenging Strzok's objectivity. All of this will become a basis for legal proceedings and legal challenges. We've already seen Judge Ellis in Virginia question the special counsel, wonder whether not only are they trying to make people sing, but also make them compose. The process is a very flawed one, and the more the American people know about it, the more distressed they are at how special counsel operate, particularly in the context of political elections. We need to know more, not less. We need less redaction, more transparency, and we have the right to judge for ourselves whether our system of justice is operating fairly within the Constitution and consistent with civil liberties. Right now, there are questions, more questions than answers.
There sure are. All right, we're going to keep watching that and wonder when the Robert Mueller report will be out. We're waiting on that, of course. Good to see you, Alan. Thanks very much for weighing in this morning.
Oh, thank you so much.
Alan Dershowitz joining us. We'll be right back with our all-star panel on all of that. Back in a minute. Welcome back. The Justice Department releasing the Carter Page FISA documents. Let's bring in our panel on that. Ed Rollins is a former Reagan-Bush campaign manager. James Freeman is an assistant editor for the Wall Street Journal editorial page. Both are Fox News contributors, and it is a pleasure to see you both.
Thank you.
Good to see you. Your reaction to what we've heard this morning, Ed Rollins.
The truth of the matter is what we've discovered with this document and the Strzok testimony, what have you, Hillary was never a target of any investigation. I mean, Strzok admitted that. She was never under investigation. They clearly, Strzok, I think, was one of the instruments of really going after the Trump campaign, and he's trying to woo his girlfriend, and basically she was a very anti-Trump. Brennan was an anti-Trump person, and my sense is that they used this idiotic document that was an opposition research document to go violate the FISA rules and all the rest of it. And this whole thing got started. Carter Page is not an operative for the Soviet Union. The problem was the Trump campaign did not have the big, significant foreign policy people. These were all kinds of fringe players, and I think to a certain extent they got Paul Manafort on past sins. That'll all be the next week's trial will start. But I think the reality is there was no there in the American public.
That was one of the texts. There's no there.
So there.
Peter Strzok said it. But you mentioned Carter Page. If Carter Page was an agent of foreign power, why is he still running around with no charges, James? Yeah, there are no charges.
Right. It's been 2 years now. And as you mentioned, a lot of black marker, a lot of redactions in these documents. But one thing that does come through is it appears that the dossier was central to it. And when they weren't relying on the dossier, they were appealing to the authority of Yahoo News without pointing out that that was a Steele story as well in terms of the source. Now, why do they continue to say that Steele is credible after they even acknowledge in their reapplications that he didn't do as he was told and he was sharing information with the media? That's a question. So I think this is another argument for the president to declassify everything. Get it out there. Enough of the redactions. Let's see the whole FISA applications. Let's see what are known as the Woods notes, where the FBI goes through and figures out what they can put in the FISA document. Yeah. We need to see where this came from.
And the editorial report did an op-ed on that, asking the president to actually make sure that you declassify these documents. Is this going to hurt the Dems in the midterms?
I think it will, because they're arguing things that aren't valid to the American public. And equally as important, their party's getting so far to the left that if Republicans who have a lot of open seats and a lot of challenge seats, if they go out and talk about the president's programs of getting the economy moving, what have you, they'll do fine. But they can't make it a national campaign. They've got to make it a local campaign.
Right, and we're going to get the GDP number out on Thursday, James, and it may very well show 4% growth. The outcomes that this president has had are very positive, and they're insane over it.
Yeah, well, going back to how 2 years later there's nothing on Carter Page, 2 years later we're asked to believe that this was some secret Russian plot to revive the American economy and rebuild the U.S. military and strengthen Ukraine to resist Russian expansionism. So it gets harder and harder to believe, and I think the president and his Republican allies in Congress have a pretty strong case on the economy.
The one thing is the Russians were trying to play here, and they have tried to play here for a long time, and they got more publicity this time because there were all these investigations.
Yeah, and because they tried to implicate Trump in it. We know Russia has been trying to undermine the West for a long time.
And not effective.
Trump had nothing to do with it. Great to see you both. Thank you so much. Have a great day, everybody. I'll